Egypt, a country renowned for its deserts and pyramids. Egypt is visited by millions of tourists every year. But it's not the pyramids, the Sphinx, or the luxury hotels that attract the majority of tourists. Nor is it the exciting markets with their exotic goods. Egypt's most popular attraction is, in fact, not even found on land. Found beneath the surface of the Red Sea, spanning the east coast of Egypt and more, attracting 75% of Egypt's tourists and known as the submerged rainforests, are the coral reefs. Defined as unique and complex systems, coral reefs are the largest biological structures on Earth. They are also the most productive and diverse ecosystems on the planet. Coral reefs require very specific conditions in order to form. The intertropical zone meets these requirements, and so in this area the stunning coral reefs flourish. The wonder of these coral reefs is such that they have countless people researching their conservation, biodiversity and formation.
Coral reefs are marine invertebrates, and it's a colony basically, so it holds a lot of animals that lives together, and they are connected by a connected tissue. The small animal is called polyp, and the polyp form a house, and this house is built by calcium carbonate, and this is what most of the people see when they go snorkeling or diving in the Red Sea. They see the calcium carbonate skeleton. This is the house of the coral reefs, and to be able to build the house, the corals need to live in a symbiotic relationship with a small algae that is called zooxanthellae. The zooxanthellae help the coral to deposit calcium carbonate and build their own reef, and this is how the reef forms.
Formed by approximately 300 hard coral species, the Egyptian coastline is home to approximately 3,800 square kilometres of coral reef. That's over 1,000 square kilometres more than the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. Each one of those kilometres is home to countless underwater species. Due to the vast number of species found in coral reefs, a deeply intricate yet sensitive ecosystem has been created. The huge biodiversity of organisms that call the reefs their home also make it incredibly ecologically important.
Coral reefs are considered to be the rainforest of the sea basically, because it forms as a habitat. It attracts a lot of invertebrate, herbivores, fishes, carnivores. A lot of animals come around the coral reefs to gain the primary products that is produced by the coral itself and the associated plants basically. So it's a big factory for producing organic materials, organic matter, biodiversity. In the sea, this is a rainforest. In a desert like this, you don't find a combination of high diversity, high abundance of animal like the coral reef. it's a lot of importance basically in the area based on the whole community of coral reef that lives in the Red Sea.
These reefs provide food and shelter to all wildlife that call them their home. Many fish feed on the coral polyps themselves, as well as the small invertebrates that inhabit the reef. Mixed in amongst the brightly coloured fish and corals can be found numerous species that are endemic to the Egyptian reefs. This means that these species can be found nowhere else in the world but here. This further boosts the ecological interest and importance of the reefs.
On the fishes, basically, we have more than 185 endemic fish species in the Red Sea. If you've been snorkeling around in the Red Sea today or any time, you will see like the masked bufferfish, the masked butterfly fish. We have about 4 or 5 different species endemic to the Red Sea of butterfly fish. So we have, as I said, more than 180 different species of fishes that are endemic to the Red Sea. The same with the invertebrate. For corals, unfortunately, it's very hard to identify the species, basically. What we try to do in some of our support of research in Egypt is to identify whether the corals in the Red Sea are endemic or they are similar to the ones in the Caribbean or in the Great Barrier Reef in Australia or anything like this.
Due to the vast biodiversity and numerous endemic species found in these coral reefs, they're considered some of the most ecologically valued landmarks. Even at night, evidence of the reef's biodiversity and productivity can be seen. The coral polyps are usually nocturnal creatures. Once the sun sets and the seas darken, polyps will extend their tentacles and feed throughout the night. Many nocturnal fish species will hover around or within the reefs during the light of the day, but at night will typically congregate above the reef. Many also migrate to seagrass or sandbeds to forage. Like our cities, these natural structures are part of an environment that never sleeps. The biodiversity of the reefs not only contribute to their ecological importance, but also their economic importance. Within and around the reefs, numerous larger, more iconic species roam. For example, sharks, such as the white-tip reef shark. Species of turtle, such as the hawksbill turtle and the larger green turtle. Several brightly coloured, spectacular eels, such as the moray eel. And even various species of dolphin, such as the bottlenose dolphin and spinner dolphin. These, as well as the beautiful coral structures and the other fascinating wildlife, help attract the majority of tourists to the reefs.
If you look at the international airports in Egypt and the amount of people, the number of people coming to these airports, so the pyramids and the Sphinx are very famous in Egypt, basically. But we have one international airport that's serving the pyramids and the Sphinx, that is Cairo International Airport. If you talk about our marine natural sources, coral reefs, we have 5 different airports. So we have Taba, Sharm el-Sheikh, Hurghada, Hurghada and Marsa Alam airports. We have 3 times the amount of people, the number of people coming to see the pyramids are coming to see the coral reefs. So if we talk about the economic importance, basically our marine natural resources brings more money to the country, more than the pyramids and the Sphinx, even though are the most famous one. If you come into Egypt, everyone thinks about the pyramids and the Sphinx. But there is 3.5 million tourists coming to the Red Sea to enjoy the coral reefs. That's a lot of money.
Over the past 20 years, the tourism industry has developed dramatically in Egypt, particularly along the east coast. Top quality hotels and resorts have been constructed to give easy access to the coral reefs and nearby attractions. The development and growth of tourist locations was an effort to increase revenue, economic growth and employment opportunities.
If we're talking about the number of Egyptians working in coral reef and working in tourism industry, the final estimate, the last estimate by the Ministry of Tourism was 5 million Egyptians working in the industry of tourism. That is depending on the Red Sea, basically, the Red Sea coast, starting from Taba down to Marsa. There's 5 million Egyptians working in this industry, or depending directly or indirectly in this industry. So basically it's very, very important in terms of the economy in Egypt.
The coral reefs also bring in revenue through the fishing industry. This can range from a local scale all the way to large commercial fishing industries. In one way or another, in Egypt, they are of vast ecological and economic importance. And yet, they are in danger. The industries that depend on the coral reefs also play a role in threatening them.
We divide usually the threats into two types. The natural threats, which is like climate change, global warming, hurricanes, floods. These are kind of natural threats that in a way we don't have a direct hand in it. And we have the human impact. And the human impact could be pollution, could be diving and snorkeling. Well, this is the irresponsible one that goes and break or touch the corals while diving. And then we have anchoring, we have overfishing, illegal fishing using illegal techniques like dynamite or cyanide or anything like this that damages the coral. So as I said, basically we have natural and human impact. And with the natural things, global warming I don't think is very natural. I think we have a big hand in the global warming and climate change. The biggest damage we have in the Red Sea was in 2012 with the mass bleaching of corals, and that was because of the global warming. Basically the water temperature raised and all the coral went white. The amount of coral that got damaged in this year was much higher than any time that any human impact been done in the Red Sea.
The damage to the coral reef through human impact can be further split into two other categories: indirect damage and direct damage. Direct damage can be caused by tourist activities such as scuba diving, and indirect damage can be caused by events originating from human activity. The popularity of recreational diving has skyrocketed in the past few decades due to easy access of many coral reefs, the increase in trained divers and interest in the underwater world. This has resulted in many more tourist boats, coastal resorts, hotels and destinations. For example, the number of hotels in the Gulf of Aqaba increased from 5 in 1989 to 141 in 2006, and the number of tourism boats in the Sharm el-Sheikh area rose from 23 to 250 in the same time period. In addition to this, at each coastal resort, there are usually the facilities to train new divers on site and provide qualifications in a matter of days with no previous diving experience. This leads to more divers under the water. This increase in tourism will lead to an increase in the impact tourism has.
Tourism, in a way, believe it or not, it is an impact. Okay, people coming. I will remember now a publication that has been done, and on the publication they were trying to estimate the damage that has been done by professional divers. So they're not talking about beginners, they're not talking about doing open water or anything like this, just professional divers. And they said in each professional divers go to the water, he will break 0.5 centimeter of corals in each dive. And that's a broke, basically. Okay. So anyone coming to the Red Sea will form a sort of impact. Anyone going diving, even a professional diver, will form a sort of impact. This is why we have to estimate something called carrying capacity, because if more people come, it's not like the coral reefs. Yeah, the coral reefs are nice, but it's not like we want everyone to come and see the coral reefs at the same time. We have to have a regulation, because wild animals would like to stay in the wild untouched, basically.
Some damage is done by divers breaking off parts of the reef as souvenirs. This is illegal, and broken coral will take years to repair. As well as this, divers can cause damage accidentally and unintentionally by merely touching the coral or trying to interact with wildlife. Accidental trampling and scraping across the reef also occurs. This is mainly seen in inexperienced divers, and most damage is within the first 10 metres of depth. Similar damage occurs through tourist diving boats and liveaboards. Evidence of this can be seen at many dive sites with heavy tourism. Many coral reefs lie just below the surface of the Red Sea, and so these boats, if not regulated, will crush the coral by scraping their hull across the top of the shallow reef. Once at a dive site, damage is sometimes caused by anchoring on the coral directly or mooring to the coral reef itself, again crushing or scraping the coral. Damage suffered by these means can be seen in various coral reefs that tourists visit. Large concrete weights, ropes, chains and more are intertwined with the fragile corals in many areas of the coral reefs. Although this can sometimes create surreal underwater scenes when corals colonise what humans leave behind, the damage affects the biological processes that occur in coral reefs, such as coral growth, as well as damaging the habitat of other marine species. This is the most common damage to the Red Sea's coral reefs. Litter is also found throughout the Red Sea, tainting the ocean and the reefs. Litter tends to gather at ports and bays in tourist hotspots, as well as being found amongst the reefs. Our discarded waste can find its way to the ocean from the shores, or from the boats and liveaboards that visit each site. This litter can range from the smallest bottle to industrial materials. These are examples of direct damage from tourism, but indirect damage also threatens the coral reef. An example of this is sedimentation of the ocean from hotels being built too close to the shore.
The coral reef ecosystem is a very sensitive ecosystem. The corals can't survive and can't flourish anywhere. You look at the Red Sea, you'll see a lot of corals in here, but you go to the Mediterranean, none. You go to the Suez Canal, none. You go to the Gulf of Suez, very small amount of corals and very few species that lives in there. They require certain conditions to be able to survive and live. Okay? And these conditions require the water to be clean. There is no sedimentation whatsoever, because the sediment, as I said in the beginning, corals are just small polyps, just small animals. If the sediment comes and block this animal, it's just going to kill it straight away. So when we have hotels that's been constructed very close to the shoreline, in the process of construction, they will have a lot of sand, a lot of sediments that is being moved by the wind into the coral reef, basically. And when it does, it just blocks all the corals and kills it immediately.
And with the construction of hotels also comes the pollutants that they produce. These pollutants include the introduction of fresh water and untreated sewage into the ocean. The fresh water changes the specific salt levels of the area required by the coral reefs, whilst the untreated sewage increases the amount of nutrients found in the water, both threatening the health and productivity of these incredible organisms. Egypt quickly became aware of the many dangers facing these natural resources and understood the necessity to protect its coral reefs and the diverse wildlife that takes shelter in the immense structures. However, due to Egypt's dependence on tourism for income and revenue, protecting the coral reefs from intense tourism is often harder than it seems.
You have in developing countries, and this is a big problem because you got the conflict between the tourism, the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of Environment. The Ministry of Tourism want to build more hotels to attract more people because this is income for the country, is bringing money in. And then we have, on the other hand, the Ministry of Environment trying to put regulations in all this. And usually money wins the battle. So when you try to ask them to keep the hotels, let's say, on the other side of the road, the Ministry of Tourism usually are not happy with this, and they want to, now we need to get as close as possible to the seaside. But we have regulations. The regulations, as I said, you have to build about 200 meters away from the shoreline. There is no construction on the shoreline itself. When you're building hotels and using sand or sediments or anything like this, you should have shades. Should be inspections by the Ministry of Environment, the EPEA, the Marine Park Rangers at the building site to make sure that all these regulations are in place.
Amongst these regulations, there is also low impact or ecotourism. This is where tourism, whether it be on the shore or exploring the incredible reefs and the impact tourism has, finds a balance. Red Sea Diving Safari is an organisation that set a sterling example of ecotourism. Founded in 1990 and consisting of 3 eco-villages, Marsa Shagra, Marsa Nakari and Wadi Latmi, Red Sea Diving Safari's eco-diving concept has been internationally recognised as a model of tourism development. The villages consist of low-impact tents and chalets and cater to the reef's carrying capacity. The organisation also has waste and water recycling policies, energy conservation policies and much more to minimise the effect of tourism. Red Sea Diving Safari are also involved in many projects concerning the health of the coral reefs.
So at Red Sea Diving Safari we're involved in several coral reef conservation projects. The main one that we do kind of independently is we're a partner of Reef Check. We have 10 sites, we survey 5 one year and 5 the next year, including Elphinstone, including our house reefs, including some of the reefs in the deep south. So basically that involves having a small team of people along a 100-metre transect, which is a fixed transect, so we do exactly the same site each time, and that involves looking at fish, substrate and invertebrates as indicator species to see the effects on the coral reef, and we submit that data to the Reef Check headquarters in California, and we carry that on year after year so that we can contribute to the global database. And ideally we'd like to expand that, but obviously it takes quite a long time to expand the team and to organise to get everyone in the same place at the same time. So we also, as part of our Reef Check commitment, I'm a Reef Check eco-diver trainer, so we can offer the Reef Check course on site. It's a 3 or 4 day course which trains people to be able to take part in surveys, and once you're qualified you can take part in that survey anywhere in the world. So we try and attract people that have qualified somewhere else, and then they can come and help us survey here. So that's one of the main things that we do. In terms of other kind of marine life related programs, we also participate in most of EPEA's programs. EPEA is the Hurghada Environmental Protection and Conservation Agency, and they run a turtle watch program, bleach watch, megabase, and we also, where possible, liaise with local experts to give them identification pictures where we can. If we see something particularly special, then we make sure that we submit it to the relevant sort of specialists so that we can contribute to local and international scientific research. So we try to do our part to make sure that we're not keeping all the information to ourselves and that we spread it around to the various organisations that would be relevant.
These organisations include ones such as PERSGA, a regional organisation based in Saudi Arabia that is responsible for the protection and conservation of the marine environment of the Red Sea, and EPEA, the Environmental Protection and Education Association, who are also involved in a number of initiatives for coral reef conservation.
So the first thing that we started with is to educate the people about the importance of these natural resources and give them the sense of ownership. This is yours. You are the one who's supposed to protect it. If you see anyone in the water breaking corals, it doesn't matter where he's from, you have to stop him, because this is your resources basically. So this is the main thing that we started with, educating people about the importance of these natural resources. And then we started to support scientific research to do with conservation. We've been hit in Egypt for the first time in 2012 by the global warming effect. So we had the first mass bleaching of corals occurring in the Red Sea in 2012. And surprise, surprise, the Egyptian government didn't consider global warming as a threat. So we didn't have any study about the thermal tolerance of coral reefs in Egypt, in the Red Sea, to climate change, for example. No studies. The Egyptian government didn't support a single study that support or go and research, okay, how our corals would tolerate change in temperature. So we started to attract funds to study the thermal tolerance of corals. We were the first organization to support an MSc and a PhD student just to study the thermal impact, the thermal tolerance of coral reefs. So we're studying this. We're studying at the same time the impact of tourism in the coral reef. So we're trying to calculate and estimate the carrying capacity for each reef. We're taking some models reef around the coast and study, okay, with the increasing number of people, how these reefs are gonna, cope with the amount of people that are coming. So we're doing this as a research project. We're doing other research projects on conservation of other animals. So we're focusing on turtles and dugongs at the moment, just to have the scientific base, because at some points, if you don't have the science, if you don't have the knowledge to talk with the decision makers in Egypt, they will just never listen to you. You will have to have the numbers, and you have to have the numbers right, you have to have the experiments, everything right when you go to ask them to establish a protected area or to put an environmental law. You have to have the basic study, the basic scientific knowledge, and this is what we're trying to do in the coral reef ecosystem, the mangrove ecosystem, and the seagrass ecosystem, just to get the basic knowledge so we can establish some conservation efforts and laws to protect these resources.
There are numerous other projects and initiatives that aim to protect and conserve these beautiful reefs and the vibrant wildlife that inhabit them, whilst allowing tourists to explore their splendour. With all these organisations investing in their safeguard, what future lies in store for the coral reefs?
So I hope that a lot of people in the future, and one of the things that as I said, we're trying to do is to talk to students in universities and schools. So when they become decision makers in Egypt one day, they will understand the value of these natural resources. So I wish that in the future we will have decision makers in Egypt that will take care more about the corals and about our natural resources. So hopefully the future is going to be much better than now. I hope so.
I think the good thing at the moment is that there are a lot of organisations who are working towards the protection of the coral reefs. EPEA plays a huge part in that. The Red Sea Rangers and the national parks play a huge part in that. Organisations like EPEA with Dr. Mohamed Ismail play a huge part in that. It's just a question of getting them to all work together towards the same goal. And this is, in a developing country, is quite difficult to achieve. We've had a good few years in terms of environmental protection because of the political situation, and that's also given people time to kind of sit back and think about how the tourism is going to develop in the next few years. And those few years have been very useful for the government also to realise that it has to be done in a sustainable way. I would say that there's some areas in the Red Sea, particularly some areas in Hurghada and perhaps further north in Sharm el-Sheikh, which the damage has already been done. But luckily here in Marsa Alam in the south, we can learn from the mistakes of others and try to develop the coastline where there's a balance between tourism and protecting the coral reef. I think, as Dr. Mohamed Ismail has said previously, if you put anything in the water or take anything out, you upset the natural balance. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of people here who need to benefit from the resources that they have. So it's about striking that balance. And I think now the technology, the scientific research and the organisations are in place that should be quite a positive future.